Hello, friends, and welcome back to Social Impact Live. I'm your host, Darrell Coleman, and today we are talking about how, as a social entrepreneur or innovator, how do you move forward and create change? How do you move forward and navigate the world? How do you do things that ultimately are impactful in a world with so many different belief systems and social ideologies that want to pull us in different directions? That's the question we'll be thinking about, and I am going to be taking you into a little bit of my life as I seek to, answer that question, but in some ways just sort of present to you what my thoughts are on it. Because if I'm being 100% realistic, this is a question that I grapple with all the time as someone who does this work. So I'm just going to give you what I've got so far, and hopefully as we continue on this journey together, we can continue to have that conversation. So, we live in a world with so many different perspectives, from socialism to capitalism being part of the conversation, or white nationalism and black nationalism being part of the conversation, or social conservatism or social liberalism being part of the conversation. And while as a child I viewed a lot of these as things that people could hold on to but still move through, still work with one another through, as an adult, it's either that things have actually changed or that I've just come to see them that way. It seems like these ideologies have become more rigid and fixed in the minds of those who adhere to them. And that creates a lot of challenges when it comes to creating social impact and change in the world, but it also creates a lot of challenges as a social innovator who is seeking to understand which systems, which methods, which solutions are the right ones. I'll give you a little bit of background on me and just how I sort of see these different belief systems and how you might come to see them as well. As a child, I grew up in Texas. So I spent, elementary school, middle school, and high school growing up in what I would call the conservative bastion of America, a place that adhered to conservative principles and a Christian belief system as well, that defined in so many ways what the ideology of that place is. There were some elements to it that were diverse, I would say, but a lot of it was either, it's in the Bible or it's not in the Bible, and so that defines what right and wrong are. And there was a political belief system that had taken some elements of the Christian view and grafted those onto the political worldview that were held rather consistently across people. Now, not everyone, but a lot of people, and that's the environment that I grew up in. Those are the people who I know, the people who I went to school with, the teachers that I had, etc. I then left at the end of high school and I went to Stanford University and ended up in the Bay Area, which I would call the liberal bastion of America, and in so many ways had a different set of beliefs. It was rather explicitly, in a lot of ways, non-Christian and largely non-religious. And it adhered more to a social liberalism as its belief system instead. The belief in freedom, in relative morality, I would say, in a lot of senses, in a harm principle, where as long as you're not hurting anyone else, you're free to do whatever it is that you'd like, and that is the concept that should be extended to people. So there was a liberal worldview and political system that accompanied that as well, that pushed for a liberalization of values and beliefs overall. So those are two extremes that I grew up within, and two ways that I would describe social ideologies in some sense. Specifically, when I think of social ideologies, I think of the ones that are non. I think when I think of social ideology, I think there are a lot of ways to describe that. You can say political, economic, and religious systems in a lot of ways. I think the political ideologies right now are becoming stronger and stronger, whereas historically religious ideologies have been some of the most rigid. The political ones are becoming things people are forming entire identities around now. Things like I'm a capitalist or I'm a socialist are becoming more common conversations that I'm seeing in the social sphere. So these are the realities that I grew up with. And as I grew up within these realities, I developed a sort of lens for how to move through them and how to live with them that I kind of want to share here with you, as well as I'll share some of the questions that I still have as I move forward. And ultimately, right, in growing up with these two lenses, what I learned is that on either side, whether it was the conservative side or the liberal side, there is a dogma that exists. Right? So, dogma is this sort of rigid adherence to a given ideology that I think in many ways can be boiled down into a short set of words, some of which I just did for you, in order to understand how that ideology functions, and also it eliminates a lot of the free thought questioning, an inquiry that goes along with looking at an ideology in the first place, right? So those who accept the dogma are people who don't really question its underlying premises in any way, and those who question the underlying premises are outside of that dogma in the first place, right? So I found that there was a dogma around the sort of social conservatism and Christian philosophy of Texas, as well as a dogma in the more liberal California that I didn't see when I first got there, but then came to see as well. A set of beliefs where if you question those beliefs or you disagree with certain aspects of them, then what happens in both situations is that you are out of the group. Okay, and so the way that I've come to see these, right, is as a questioner. I am a questioner. That's sort of who I am as a person. I've always seen myself as someone who I want to know truth. I want to see the right answers. I don't want to believe in things that I don't understand. And so I'm always asking more questions, more explanation. What's the thing that underlies that belief? Why is that true? How come that conflicts with this thing? How can you hold both those views simultaneously when they conflict with one another? And for me, that questioning is a path toward congruency within myself. So the me that is me and the me that I express into the world, I want those to be the same. And for that to happen, I need to understand as much as possible about the way that man presents his ideas or her ideas. So here's what I've got for you today as I think about navigating through these sort of social ideologies and what we can really do about that, which is something that I developed before. One is, I think, as a social entrepreneur, as a social innovator, the lens that I've developed and that I bring to this is the one that I share with you, which is ultimately to be a questioner. Be someone who questions the ideologies that you are being told about, that you are being fed in the first place. One thing that I have grown accustomed to is to question things that large groups of people believe in. And I tend to be slower to accept them because I want to make sure that they actually make sense to me rather than me being someone who's going along with the crowd. And I think a lot of the reason for that is that when I look at history, I see massive social movements where lots of people believed something, and where currently we believe that millions and millions of people were either purely wrong or that their collective actions were actually harmful and counterproductive toward the goals that we seek. And so, some examples of that were the acceptance of slavery in the United States of America. Millions and millions of people believed that slavery was okay. In fact, millions of people believed that slavery was morally right, and the conversation was one that used the Bible as the basis for why that social hierarchy was an okay thing to happen, to have. And as I said, millions of people believed this. There were also people, a growing number of people over time, who believed that that was not the case, and similarly used the same Bible as the basis for why that wasn't the case, as well as the U.S. Constitution, and the incongruency that they felt between living in the land of the free and the home of the brave while enslaving millions of other human beings. And so I like to think that when I look at history, I would be on the side of the questioner at the very least. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm on the side of the opposition, but it does mean that I am in the group of people asking questions to try to understand what's really happening. Another example would be the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition, right? Where that was a smaller group of people, but there was a belief within the people who had power that, going out and finding the non-Christians, going out and using the sword as a method of maintaining that Christian power was a good thing. And, I want to say that I would be on the side of questioning that as well. So, as I think about these movements, the first thing that I would say is to be a questioner, right? But that doesn't really get you all the way there, and I'm not necessarily going to get you all the way there on this video. I'm just sort of reflecting on some of the things that are relevant also to remind myself of. One is to be a questioner. Two, I think, is to see the humanity in all the people who are involved. Human beings are trying their best to make it through life. They're trying their best to do what they can with the information that they have available, and they're trying their best to optimize their own lives at the very least, but at times the lives of other people that they care about, maybe even the lives of people who they don't know, though often I think it is themselves and those that they care about. And so there's a humanity to that. There's a humanity within that. So whether someone has a conservative social ideology or a liberal social ideology, there's a humanity within that. Whether someone's a capitalist or a socialist, there's a humanity within that. And one thing that I see in our public discourse right now is the dehumanization that exists, the lack of humanity, the lack of human empathy that exists when someone has a different set of beliefs, when someone votes differently, when someone lives their life differently. And I think as a social innovator, especially as someone who wants to create change in the world, to lack that empathy is going to block you from being able to truly navigate a path that is different from the one that has been walked in the first place. I think a lot about this concept. To be a creator of change, to create change, to do something that hasn't been done before, you have to do something that hasn't been done before. So to be the questioner and to be the person who sees the humanity within systems or the humanity of the people who adhere to systems, even when those systems are things that you might disagree with or disagree with in part, is part of the path that isn't being walked. And that's an important thing for us to keep in mind as well. So see the humanity of other people is the second thought that I have. And then the third thought that I have is really around using and taking what is useful and discarding what is not. So I am constantly in a process as the questioner of evaluating these systems. I am evaluating capitalism. I am evaluating socialism. I am evaluating Christianity and a faith that I hold as well. I am a person of faith. I believe in God. I am rooted in a belief that we are all created by God, and that my work here in so many ways is to help ensure that shiningness, that beauty, that thing, that glory of creation that God instilled into all of us can shine in everyone as freely and purely as possible, and that some of the social muck that we've placed on top of it, the limitations, the oppression, the traumas, etc., that those can be removed so that can shine through. So it's one aspect of that. But I guess my point is that you need to use what's useful. take what's useful from these, but be an evaluator, be a critic, be a questioner of each of these. And then within them say, well, that part makes sense, but that part, it doesn't quite make sense yet, and keep asking questions about it. This other thing makes sense, and this other one doesn't quite make sense yet, and keep asking questions about it. But recognize that in doing that, right, you will end up on the outside of the people who are fully into the dogma of that belief system, and that needs to be a place that you grow comfortable being. I find myself there often. I am largely on the same side as so many people, actually. Probably more on the same side, I feel, as so many people than they feel they would be looking at the groups that they're a part of. Because I share some common beliefs with social conservatives, and I share some common beliefs with social liberals, and I share some common beliefs with capitalists, and I share some common beliefs with socialists. And so I find myself on their side for so many different things. But the dogma means you buy in fully or you don't, right? You're all the way in or you're not. And where I'm at is I have to be a questioner of these systems, because this one throws out the baby with the bathwater, and this one throws out the baby with the bathwater, and they're different babies, but they're throwing them out either way. And to find a path that works for creating change, I need to understand what is good from what exists, from what's being presented, and what isn't as well. So those would be my tips, my thoughts on living in a world with so many ideologies. It is to say that they pull us in different directions, and it's not easy. It's not easy to navigate that. It's not easy to figure out where to go and which one to focus on and which one to cling to and whether this one's true or that one's true. And there's pressure from the way that things are talked about now, the way that things are presented on social media, the critiques that are sent out there, the name calling, and all these pieces. If you're not a capitalist, or if you're not a socialist, or if you're not a conservative, if you're not a liberal, or if you didn't vote for Trump, or you didn't vote for Biden, or whoever it is that is up right now, there's just so many buckets that we end up being placed in. But you as a social innovator and me as a social innovator, we need to continue to move through those and understand what is good from this and what is good from that. For me, again, I gave you what my goal is. My goal is to amplify that light within everyone, to help them find that light themselves. I think that one aspect of our creation, right, is to share the gifts that we have with the world in a way that is truly impactful and meaningful. And I think that the way that our world is set up, there are a lot of people who never really get to do that, or never do that, never shine the way that they would want to, right? And I want to help them get there, the ones who want to. So for me, that's the last piece I'll say. I have a root. I have one foundation at least, which is that I believe in God, and I believe in this idea of where we were created and where we come from. I think that without any root, without any anchor, it does get hard to not get pulled in a million different directions, or to not find yourself as a part of the dogma, the group who is bought into the dogma. And so, that would be my final sort of thought on that overall, is maybe figure out what is your root. I've yet to see a system as professed and created by man that is perfect. I've yet to see a man-made articulation of something that seems to be without flaw. And so whichever one we choose to adhere to as the anchor, that sounds somewhat challenging. And so I try to anchor to something that's not, at least in my mind, man-made. All right, that's what I've got for you today. That's sort of a long episode on navigating the different social ideologies that exist. This is something that's been on my mind for a while now. It's something that I'm constantly wrestling with. I'm constantly struggling with as I move forward and as I make change, as I present what I believe to the world. There is that feeling of the people who are bought into the dogma, right, or who want to throw you out if you don't believe lock, stock, and barrel the full thing. There's the challenge of navigating through those spaces when some views are different. At the same time, I've met incredible people, great people who who are questioners, I would say, themselves. They're not fully made up their minds on what is good and what is bad about a given situation, on what's needed and what's not in a given situation. And I've been able to work with those individuals too, to make change in the world that I think is meaningful and that really matters. Because in the end, all this work we do, all these systems, all these ideologies, all this stuff, it does come back down to real people, one person at a time. How is that person's life being impacted? How is that person being helped? How is that person, how is the suffering, the pain, the hunger that they feel, how is that being alleviated through these actions? Right? Those are the questions we need to be answering. And so if we can keep that in focus, I think we have a chance at continuing to move forward through a world of so many belief systems. That's what I got for you today. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I would love to hear any and all thoughts really that you have on that topic or any other topic. Please leave those in the comments, and I will see you again on the next episode of Social Impact.